New land, new life. The draw for the Norwegian immigrants to leave their homeland and travel across the ocean to a destiny unknown yet filled with hope. Cruel economic and social conditions pushed them to leave, yet they nurtured an irrepressible faith in the opportunities for a better life in a different part of the world. They boarded ships and ventured out onto the treacherous sea with all their possessions packed in wooden America trunks. One such trunk belonged to Arnie and Maren Olsen and their 4 children, Christine, Olina, Oli, and Volba. They made their journey in 1870. On the trunk was carved the name and the final destination of Vermont, North America. They stayed for 2 years in Vermont, where Volba fell ill and died. The grieving family then ventured on to Stevens County in Minnesota, where they claimed a homestead in 1872 in Wrensville Township by a lake near the village of Donley. The lake provided water for household and livestock use, was surrounded by oak trees, wild fruit trees, and fish in the lake for food. It is a testament to the hospitality of the times that John Kling, an earlier settler, provided a home for the family of 5 until their home could be built. 4 more children would be born: Walberg, Mary, Sigvarda, and son Charles Reinhardt, born on June 25, 1874, made Maren and Arnie's family total 5 girls and 3 boys. Just across the township lines in Grant County, a baby girl was born to another Norwegian immigrant family and grew to young adulthood. Halvor and Bertine Stenberg Johnson homesteaded in 1877. They had traveled from the Flekkefjord area of Norway and settled near Herman, Minnesota. Their firstborn was a daughter named Jenny Louise Johnson, born November 24, 1877. Twin boys and another sister, Edna, joined the Johnson family by 1884. When the twins Herbert and Harold were born, the happy parents hung 2 pair of overalls from the top of the barn to make the announcement. The 4 children all attended school in the schoolhouse in the yard of their homestead property. They began building the Pioneer Society. With few doctors for the needs of the population, Maren Olsen had a hand in delivering over 70 new citizens in the area. For the mailman delivering mail in Wrensville Township, there were just too many Olsens, so a name change occurred. Maren and Arnie chose to change their last name of Olsen to Sather. Arnie had been born in Norway in 1831 in an area named Sather Yard of Kongsvinger, Norway. As it happened, Arnie would also be very involved in building the local church near Donley bearing the name Kongsvinger Church. The youngest Sather son, Charles, was an ambitious, hard-working man who, at the age of 25, applied for a marriage license to marry his chosen, Jenny Louise Johnson, aged 22. The local papers were complimentary in the news of the occasion.
A pretty wedding was held last Sunday, November 19, 1899, when Miss Jenny Johnson was united in marriage to Charles R. Sather of Donnelly. Reverend Winther of Morris performed the ceremony at 11 o'clock a.m. in the presence of 150 guests. A most sumptuous of banquets was served after the ceremony.
Jenny taught school in several of the local school districts. One was located in Grant County, school year 1894 to 1895. A second in Traverse County, school year 1895 to 1896. And the third, district number 36, in Wrensville Township, Stevens County, school year 1896 to 1897. She taught from October 1st to January 31st, receiving $32 in pay for 33 pupils. The winter of 1897, she was back in Grant County with 27 pupils. Once Charlie and Jenny were married, she became the bookkeeper for the lumber company. This busy woman also played the organ for the Kongsvinger Church and gave music lessons to other aspiring musicians. They lived the first 6 years of their marriage on the farm with Charlie's parents, Maren and Arnie, in the same home divided for the 2 families' use. The agreement between them was a contract written that $1 would be paid, as well as the feed and care of 1 horse, 1 milk cow, and an annual allotment of 600 pounds of flour ground and stored for bread baking for the natural lives of either parent. Agnes, Clifford, Lawrence, and Mabel were the first children born during this time. The first child was Agnes Harriet, born on August 4, 1900. Grandmother Sather got so excited when she heard the news that she put her bonnet on backwards. 2 years later, in 1902, the first boy, Clifford, arrived. Jenny contracted rheumatic fever while Clifford was a baby, so Grandma Johnson helped to care for him. Within a year, in 1903, Lawrence arrived. 2 years later, Mabel was born in 1905. Along with farming in Wrensville Township, Charlie managed the Donley Lumber Company. Family members helped in any way that ages allowed. Son Lawrence was especially adept at figuring lengths of boards in his head. Charlie built a house in the town of Donley, where they moved with the first 4 children. Along with his manager job, he was the village recorder. He sold steamship tickets for the passage to Europe and for some who wished to come to America. Among the items he sold were organs, sewing machines, and other equipment that needed to be special ordered. Unremitting hard work began to take its toll, and signs of his weakening health became very apparent, yet he mustered on with determination. Ralph Jennings, the 5th child, was born in 1909. Charles chose Jennings as a middle name as he liked U.S. Secretary of State William Jennings Bryan. In December of 1911, the older children knew there was a baby being born upstairs. Agnes and Mabel could hear the sound of babies crying, so they waited for the midwife, Mrs. Lear, to take one home with her. But Mrs. Lear went home alone, and there were 2 more Sather babies, twins Donald and Doris. They would complete the family of Jenny and Charles Sather, 7 healthy children in 11 years. In 1914, Charlie and Jenny were dreaming about a move back to the farm. The existing barn on the farm was the original, and Charlie designed and readied for a newly built barn. Though afflicted with continued health issues, Charlie remained involved in the community and in providing for his family. He was a member of the lodge organization named the Knights of Pythias. Several other prominent citizens of Stevens County were members of this lodge. Names included Frank A. Hancock, Christian C. Ersted, Dr. Charles Kane, William Monroe, and John W. Eddy, all citizens that were leaders in Stevens County communities during this period of history. The Knights of Pythias is a fraternal organization founded in Washington, D.C. in 1864. The principles were non-denominational but Christian and were centered on friendship, charity, and benevolence. When inducted, a man receives a ceremonial sword, several of which are in the Stevens County Museum collection. A few of the nationally known knights include Louis Armstrong, jazz musician; William Jennings Bryan, U.S. Secretary of State; Hubert H. Humphrey, U.S. 38th Vice President; Franklin D. Roosevelt, 32nd U.S. President. On August 23, 1914, Charles Reinhardt Sather died from uremic poisoning or kidney failure. His sudden death at the age of 40 was considered a community tragedy. Surprisingly, 2 of his life involvements brought about a controversy in the Consvinger Church. The question arose as to whether or not he should be buried in the churchyard, as he had life insurance and was member of a lodge, the Knights of Pythias. Some felt if one trusts in the Lord, he doesn't need insurance or fraternal comrades. He was buried in the churchyard, and the family of 8 survivors benefited from his forward thinking about the life insurance. At 37, Jenny was a widow with 7 children, all too young to farm. They did move back to the farm, and Charles's brother, Ole, and his wife, Katerina, became not only family, but part of the survival strategy of this family. Ole farmed the land with the children helping with the mustard weeding in the fields. The hard work engaged by the family not only provided their survival, but also the memories that glued them together. As the boys matured, the field work was managed by Lawrence and Jenny. Lawrence planted the crops. When the small grain was ready, the steam engine for threshing arrived. Aunt Kate, Jenny, and the girls made meals for the 12 to 14 men. The men slept in the haymow for the threshing. Then the crew and engine moved on, and Lawrence went along with the crew to work off some of the cost of the threshing. The gardens produced fresh produce as well as produce to be canned for the winter months. Living by the lake, the fish were plentiful and mud hens laid their eggs around the shoreline. The children gathered and waited. By fall, the turkey hens had hatched a number of young in the nest by the lake, so the family had a nice flock. Jenny and Lawrence milked the cows each day, bringing the milk into the dining room to be put through the cream separator. This same practical family had an incubator for 128 chicks in one of the bedrooms. The kitchen stove, named Monarch, was in use from early morning until late at night almost every day of the year. It provided heat, cooked food, baked goodies, and supplied hot water for canning and clothes washing. It was even known to warm up a new litter of baby pigs who regained their pink color resting in a box on the open lid of the oven door. Each week, 20 to 30 loaves of bread were baked for family use and the numerous guests that came for a visit. Jenny loved visitors. The more, the merrier. The children remember Sundays when whole families would come to visit and eat the loaves of bread, lefse, and home-canned sauces. Folks would say, "I know Aunt Jenny is home," and Jenny would say, "Can't you squeeze in another plate?" Daughters Agnes and Mabel would be washing the dishes as they went along between settings. In the summer, along with the weeding of mustard, the harvesting and canning of gardens, the baking and washing and gathering of eggs, the circus came to town. The Sather children, always inventive, decided that they would walk on stilts just like the performers. They hunted up the materials and began the project of constructing the stilts. They built them higher and higher as they mastered the skill, with the only challenge finding a place from which to mount the stilts and begin the walk. Clifford was very talented in quizzes and memory games. He was a good singer and knew many songs, some that he played on the violin. Jenny went to the Twin Cities to have her tonsils out. When she came back, she was an invalid. People didn't expect her to live. With care from Aunt Kate and Uncle Ole, her brothers Harold and Herb, and her close brood of children, Jenny lived another several years but was bedridden. Agnes was teaching and providing funds for the family. Mabel dropped out of school and took care of Jenny and the family. The younger children, Ralph, Donald, and Doris, tried to help in many ways by planting and harvesting potatoes, carrying wood, and gathering eggs or picking apples. Lawrence and Clifford farmed, and in the winter trapped muskrats on the nearby lake for extra income. Some of the better years, they trapped hundreds. The animals were skinned with the carcass used for chicken feed. The skins were then stretched on shingles to dry. They were sold at the Donley Mercantile Store or mailed to Funkston Company in St. Louis, Missouri. Each pelt in good condition was worth 25 cents. This is the legacy of the pioneer family of Charles and Jenny Sather. Jenny passed away on May 23, 1926. She was 49 years old. Her 7 children ranged in ages of 15 to 26. Agnes, Mabel, and Lawrence had the job of raising the family along with the building of their own lives. Each of the 7 Sathers continued on to successful and prosperous lives, stories unto themselves. Agnes's story continued with marriage to Peter Erdahl, becoming a teacher, playing the organ for church, and bearing 2 children, James and Joan. As the oldest of the Sather siblings, her daughter, Joan, became a family favorite as the first grandchild and niece while the family was still in the growing up years. She was beloved by her extended family and included in many family holidays and special events. Agnes and Pete continued to be a rock for the entire family. Clifford worked away from home and remained a bachelor. He attended the West Central School of Agriculture, spent time working in Alaska, and then returned to Stevens County. He converted an old schoolhouse into a home on his farm, where he died at 68. Lawrence farmed in Wrensville and El Dorado townships of Stevens County for 42 years. He married Elfrida Duenhoger in 1967. He had 3 stepchildren from this marriage, Myrna, William, and Diane. Lawrence was a Stevens County commissioner for 12 years. Mabel completed her schooling after dropping out to care for her invalid mother. She attended Moorhead State for normal school teaching training and taught at country school. Encouraged to take the civil service test, she passed and moved to Washington, D.C. for a career in the Labor Department. She remained single and returned to Minnesota in her retirement years. Ralph went to the West Central School of Agriculture, where he played on the winning football team. He was good with animals and he farmed for 27 years. His marriage to Clara Morseth produced 4 children, Russell, Barbara, Charles, and Sylvia. Donald, one of the twins, married Beatrice McCallop. They had 4 children, Donald, James, Barry, and Bonnie. He taught school and farmed. Beatrice and Donald owned the Red Owl in Donley for a time, and then moved to Minneapolis, where he worked for Augsburg College as farming proved too difficult with severe asthma. Doris Sather Erdahl, the other twin, married Henry Erdahl. Doris was a teacher at country school in Stevens County. Doris and Henry lived and farmed in Donley Township. They had 2 daughters, Dorothy and Helen. Dorothy was a regional winner and candidate in the Princess K of the Milky Way contest from Minnesota. Her career choice was a registered nurse. Helen became a teacher. They both married and raised families, and the history continues. The stories become heritage, and the America immigrant trunk becomes a family heirloom. As Doris says in the writing of the family history, this trunk is an inspiration for us to be strong, reliable, and God-fearing people, so our grandparents may be proud of us and their many descendants.